Well, I'm so excited for our guest today, having done news for decades. You never know what's going to happen. When I was doing overnights in LA, something happened in France, and I was swinging in the wind because I was the only one there except for my editor, and it's breaking news, and all you have to go by is the TV at the time. My boss was leaving, and he said, "Oh, you're going to interview Hillary Clinton when she was running for president in about 10 minutes." And I said, "What?" Because I was not well versed on it. I was kind of new, and no way. I had no idea what to ask her. So I called my friend who is very into politics, and I said, "Please text me like 10 great questions." So you kind of have to be flexible. I mean, I have a million other stories, but those are just two that come to mind. You have to be flexible, and you have to, work off what you have available at the time. So I cannot imagine how exciting it would be to be in Rome and cover either a pope's funeral or a conclave or the inaugural mass. And so, Father, you're going to tell us more about our guest today who got to do just a lot of that through the decades. I'm Maggie McKay, and my co-host is
Father Tom Gibbons of the Paulist Fathers, and we are Candid Catholics. Our podcast, season 1 is Conclaves and Cardinals, and we have got a very exciting guest today. We've got David Ushery, who is the lead anchor from News 4 New York, but is also become quite a Vatican correspondent during his time in broadcasting and was in Rome when Pope Francis's funeral was taking place, and he's gonna, I think, have a lot of great insights for us. David, this is David Ushery from News 4 New York. We are so excited to have David Ushery with us today. We were actually supposed to film this 2 weeks ago, Thursday. Right. We're gonna talk about what could we expect from the conclave and, just based on David's experience from broadcasting from Rome. And then as we were about to sit down, everyone got the text message, white smoke. So we all just ran out and
yeah. Papers are flying, news are yelling. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So it was all good, but we're so glad to have you here. You have such a great background, not only in journalism, but specifically one of the reasons we want to talk to you today is journalism specifically related to the Vatican and covering these big stories. You're a Catholic, and I'll put a little shout out for St. Paul the Apostle, New York City, of right. which David is a parishioner. That's how we got to know one another. And we're just really excited to have you here today, David.
Thanks, Brother Tom. Yeah, it's good to be with you. And it was something that you and I hadn't connected in a while. And then when we did, we wanted to kind of talk this through on the podcast. And then that went by the wayside. Obviously, for good reason. But yes, I would say most of my adult career here in New York, been about covering the 5 boroughs as a reporter and as an anchor for 32, 33 years. And obviously in the New York Archdiocese, the church is a big subject matter to cover. So I've spent a fair amount of time in Rome, going back to the consistory when Edward Egan became Cardinal, Archbishop of New York. And that was the same consistory that Jorge Bergoglio became a Cardinal. And then other issues when John Paul summoned the bishops to discuss the sex abuse crisis, but also other things. I happened to be there for the canonization of Mother Teresa, the Saint Mother Teresa. So I've been there several times, and so I think it was understood that when Pope Francis would pass away that I would probably go and cover it. And, good on him because, a number of us had some bags packed, but he put up a good fight, as we say, and as we know. So,
David.
Yes, Maggie.
David, I am dying to hear about that course you took a few years back about how to cover the Vatican journalistically. What was that like? What did you learn?
It was interesting, and it all came about, believe it or not, as we were preparing for the visit of Francis to the United States, his one and only visit, Philadelphia, New York, and D.C.
And that was 2015, right?
Yeah, 2015. And in the course of that, I met a man from the Santa Croce, Pontifical University of Santa Croce in Rome, and he said every 2 years they offer this program called the Church Up Close, specifically for journalists who cover the Vatican from afar. And it's like a week-long seminar. So that sounded about right, and so I went, and I have to say it was good because they brought in various people leading dicasteries and various other reporters and journalists who cover their beat in Rome. So I must just say it was enlightening, whereas most of my career covering the parish, parochial church, and then the issues from afar that the church was facing. Getting that hands-on experience in Rome certainly was helpful and eye-opening for me.
Did it change the way you reported after that, at least on the Vatican?
I would say Maggie had broadened it. I mean, I think with any story, and I know one of the things we want to discuss is, well, if you're Catholic, how do you cover the church objectively? And that's obviously something that could be applied to any subject matter, right? Like a reporter has a right to register with a political party, but you're really not supposed to talk about what political party, or you're certainly not to advocate on behalf of either political party. So I think reporters were called upon to do those things, even though we are functioning members of a society, whatever that society may be. So, if anything, it put more pressure to be balanced. You didn't want to be overly critical of the church, but at the same time, there were issues, obviously, and things that had to be covered and questions that had to be asked of the church's leaders. But I think getting that perspective and really understanding, and this was said to me, and I don't pretend to have any measure of understanding it, but those who live and work in Rome, they would say to me, maybe you guys understand this, they would say, listen, there's the Roman way. And we can't explain it, but there's the Roman way. And I don't know if other time, but there's just, it's an ancient city, and the Vatican is an ancient enterprise, and there is a rhythm. And, when you're an outsider to that, you know it's there, but you don't always know. And it's hard to parachute in. So that was insightful,
David, I just realized, I just want to let you know one thing. If every once in a while I get up, it's because I'm in a shared office space, and it's got these automatic lights that turn off after 10 minutes. So if I get up out of my chair, I'm not disagreeing with anything you say. I'm literally just getting up and waving my arms around to make the sensor go to put the lights back on. So
well, at Talent, I thought you were giving me the rap signal, like wrap it up. We've already gone too far.
So David, I have to know, is it true? I heard so many reports, watching the coverage, that the Italian media kind of exaggerate or just say what they want, and maybe it's not exactly factual. Is that true?
I would never claim that they're not factual, but it was interesting. I was there with a colleague, a reporter of mine, Gabi Acevedo, a reporter, so we tag teamed the coverage, and Gabi had spent a few years growing up in Rome, teen years, so he had a working understanding of Italian. And it was interesting leading, both immediately post the funeral while we're there, and of course leading up to the conclave, how the Italian media was reporting certain things. And there's definitely, Maggie, I'd say, an energy and an enthusiasm and perhaps a stretching of the reality as it is. I would not say sensational, but there is definitely who they thought were papabile and who they thought were coming out and the narrative around that. So there is that sense of it, if you will, and maybe reflective in the passion of how generally they communicate with each other.
Was that fun for you just to sort of watch just in your own head, like,
yes, absolutely.
That's how they do it?
It really is. And insightful, because very often, when you're covering the Vatican, which is steeped in secrecy, but leaks, those who cover it, you're trying to at least hear what they're saying. I mean, so for example, for us, the Newark Archdiocese is part of our coverage. So the Italians in their top 5 had Cardinal Tobin as a possibility, which, we had to pay attention to. Still seemed like a long shot because really there's not going to be an American Pope. So we kept that, oh, wait. Yeah.
Well, as you're saying this, you started off from a Catholic Church standpoint anyway, like the local reporter focusing on the parish and stuff. Yeah. And then you go to like Central. But, as I'm wondering, as you're talking about like the Roman coverage or the Italian coverage and the U.S. coverage, for the Roman coverage, it is a local story.
Yes.
It's a worldwide story, and because it's the Diocese of Rome,
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And the other thing about that, too, is that I tried to reflect to our viewers is that, obviously it's grandiose and this was a seminal moment, but Rome and the city itself and the people of Rome kind of coexist with the Vatican. So it's not on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't consume their lives except for the disruptions that may come. But yet, for Francis, you saw signs around, Grazie Francesco, because he was not only the Bishop of Rome, but he actually interacted with the citizens of Rome. It's poor, and it's working people. So there was that interesting aspect of, he was, in that sense, a Roman. And so they were mourning him, yes, the head of the church, and the church will always have its place, but as you know, Father Tom and Maggie, there's also a wave of secularism that goes through Europe, But on this moment, it's interesting to see that relationship with Rome itself.
David, when you were covering the funeral, what was sort of the word on the street? Like, what were people saying they had hopes for as far as the next pope?
The openness, the continued openness of the church is what I would see. We would stop people on the long street that leads up to the Vatican, the Via de Conciliazione, forgiveness for Italian pronunciation or lack thereof. But that's where we try to find most people. And some of them happen to be in Rome at that time for the Jubilee year, which happens every 25 years. Some of them happen to be on tourists. Some of them said, I grew up Catholic, but I'm not practicing now. Some I'm not religious. But it seemed the theme of people that I talked to, Maggie, seemed to hope for the accessibility. Some young people were like keeping it accessible to young people, and the openness, a welcoming nature of the church is at least the overriding theme that I thought I heard. And I think my colleague Gabi would say the same thing.
David, I can't remember, were you in Rome for when John Paul II passed?
So I was given this track record that I had just changed and moved to NBC, and so it was expected I would go. But beheaded me was a longtime veteran who'd covered the church for a long time, a guy named Ralph Penza.
Yeah.
And even at that time, you started to see kind of a scale back in budgetary allocations and things of that nature. So Ralph ended up going. I long thought I would cover the funeral of John Paul, but I ended up reporting from home here in the diocese, talking to people here about it. Yeah.
How much has coverage changed, say, maybe 10 years ago? Because now we have social media and TikTok and influencers. Yeah. So what happened this time around when you were covering it, as opposed to something that would never have happened 10 years ago? Yeah,
it's a good question, because when I started out, it was still, even for us in the United States, let's say, the big three networks and the big three anchors. As a matter of fact, you may remember, I think this is when we started to realize that Peter Jennings might be ill or something, because I believe he wasn't there for the coverage of John Paul's funeral, and Peter Jennings would have been the premier anchor at ABC at that time, and he didn't go. We can fact check myself, but I'm pretty sure, and that's when we started to learn that he subsequently had health issues and passed away. But Maggie, I think, I'm on that plaza and I'm next to 4 or 5 different people with their phone, and they're reporting to Hungary or wherever. And I think that's really it. The credentials, I forget the final number, but I thought it was like 4,000, 5,000 press credentials alone. So imagine that, and just my own competitors, and I think the immediacy of the information in the story. I'll never forget, I was there when Francis became Pope. And the initial story circulating, before you could dial it back, but everyone was trying to it was that he chose Francis for the founder of the Jesuits, Francis Xavier. And that starts going around. That had to be walked back almost immediately, because he chose Francis for Francis of Assisi. So the speed, Maggie, and now it's that much more in 2025, and trying to provide context and trying to scramble. And it's just, look, in one way it's getting more information out, but it's also harder, as you can imagine, with any story, to vet it, to take a moment, to provide context.
Right. Just as a layman, I guess you'd say, watching the coverage, I couldn't even keep up. Like, I couldn't figure out which one did I want to watch. And I kept flipping around, and I'm going online, and there's just almost too many choices. It can be overwhelming.
I agree. I feel the same way as someone who's in it. It can almost be overwhelming, and that's, for me, that's what I count on now, is longevity as a local anchor in a market for so long. Because now I'm hoping I have a relationship with viewers here, at least. So if there's something happening, or if it's an ongoing COVID crisis for us, they know that we've been together through it. That's the only thing I can try to count on, because I understand that the information in and of itself, viewers can get anywhere. So, or listeners or streamers.
Yeah.
Right.
So, David, when you were taking that course, was there anything, I know you talked about how it really broadened your perspective. Was there anything specifically that you learned, or is there anything that you're kind of like, oh, I never thought of it that way? Because I know when I talk to some people in the church, they get really, really frustrated about how often American, or different kinds of press will cover the Vatican, because it's impossible for us not to bring our American perspectives on things. So we're like, we're used to separation of church and state, where that's not a Vatican thing at all. And are there things that were eye-opening for you when you took that course?
I think the layers of bureaucracy, if you will, in other words, you say, why does the Vatican move so slow? It seems to move so slow. That's what the perception is. And then you realize that it doesn't move in the linear fashion that we think in the dicasteries and things like that. We'd had a presentation even back then on the finances of the Vatican, but I don't think even then it was the full measure of what came to emerge. They tried to do that. I would say the course did try to take on the headline, not the headline, but the issues that were not only in the headlines for us as Americans, but what people wanted to know. So they took us to a place that you rarely get to, which is behind the doors of the doctrine of the faith. And I think I got a little insight once the priest who worked there explained how they investigate or where they're coming from on certain cases. But they also did take us to see the faith in action, you know, in places around Rome, some of the historic places and how it fit in. And all of that is informing our coverage ultimately, and informing, even if we're not writing about it chapter and verse, understanding how this all flows from the essence of Catholic faith and Catholic Church helps paint a fuller picture, I think, as it would with other subject matters if you were able to immerse for a week.
Was it all Catholics in your class, or was it various?
No,
Yeah.
no, there were journalists from various parts of the world. There were some correspondents from EWTN. That might have been when Mother Angelica was still alive. I don't remember. It was 2016 when I did it.
Yeah.
It was after Pope Francis had come to the United States, and then I did it 2016. But there were, I think there predominantly were, Father Tom.
Yeah.
But I don't think they all were.
Okay.
David, as far as social media, do you know a certain amount of it, or do you have someone to help you do it? Because the immediacy, I mean, you're on the air, you're writing, you're doing all this. How does that work now?
Oh, wow. Well, you know what? If you can figure it out, please tell me. Shoot me an email, because you have hit upon something that a number of us who've been doing it as long as I have are discussing. So when you say, are you expected, I don't think that there's a mandate number. Some stations might. But I think that the market and the world demands of it now. So Father Tom mentioned my posts in Rome. Some of the people only learned that I was there from the social media posts. They didn't see any of the coverage on Channel 4 or broadcast. And that is the way of the world now. And so I think it's expected, it's more or less demanded by the media ecosphere that we're in. For some, it's easier than others. For me, it's not intuitive yet. I just don't feel like doing it if I don't have anything particularly to report. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm at the gym and look what I'm not judging that, because some people are cultivating their relationship with their followers. But it is hard when you've come out of the traditional broadcast mindset, and I'm thinking deadlines of that and writing my script and then being in front of the camera, when there's its constant churn and a constant, we used to say in the business, monster to feed. We have to feed the monster.
Yeah.
So Maggie, it's playing out in real time. We're getting better. Some of us wish we had a dedicated person that could just handle that or help us through it. But the reality is, I think they want it to still have some sort of authentic voice or something. I'm trying to get better at it and trying to do it more, but it's not even an option, I don't think.
It's time consuming for sure.
It is to do it right, and then to put the borders on it and then type
and all the choices, the font, the size.
Yeah. By the time I get through all that, I forgot what I was going to post.
I know. And which format. Yeah. Are you going to do a story or a post? This is like, oh my God. Oh well. Hopefully it's keeping our minds sharp.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what are you hearing now that you're back in New York? What are you hearing about how people responded to Leo, and what hopes, expectations, cautions? What's the?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, it's been a lot of optimism, and I'm hearing from people again some who are alienated from the church, or some who are definitely not. But it all seems like, hey, they seem to like this new pope. Whether it's honeymoon or how they're assessing it. Obviously, for an American audience, a sports flex with the Chicago sports teams is something, I think we're looking in particular for young people, and we'll continue to look to see how this maybe opens them up or opens their mind up. Because I did hear that in Rome, as I said. But again, we'll wait and see. I mean, and it's always coming out of 13 years of Francis. There's going to be a period of adjusting. But I think there seems to be, Father Tom, a sense that there's a transition and an openness to say, well, let's see what that transition brings.
Right. I know James Martin, Father James Martin had.
I saw him over there, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. Yeah, I know, he put up a post recently, and he just basically said, let Leo be Leo.
Yeah.
Be Francis, and he's going to be Leo. And that's great. I did see, going back to the sports metaphor, I did see something very biblical with Leo and his support of the Chicago White Sox, and the fact that they were last place, I think, if not the American League, all the majors.
Right.
And it was like the rock that has been, the stone that has been thrown away has
Right,
become
is now the cornerstone.
So White Sox fans,
Right.
have something to celebrate, even if the record isn't.
Right. Something to make you want to wear their merch. You may wear their shirt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they have Papal White Sox merch now.
I think I saw that headline. Yeah. So it's interesting because I think for those who are traditional, sometimes even Francis, I think, ran up into that. Sometimes the willingness to appeal some modern senses or some of the more societal aspects can rub traditional the wrong way. They think the papacy should be held up here. So it is interesting. And I guess Father Martin's right. Let's Leo be Leo. Let's find out where the fish are.
Yeah, but I was also reflecting. I think this is also at least maybe, and I don't know how Bergoglio was covered in Venezuela, of course, but I think it's going to be interesting for us in that because the Pope, even because it's usually from a different country, it's always from a different country, unless you're Italian, where I think I think a lot of the mystery of the man, the Pope, is going to be dispelled a little bit because he's an American, because you're like, he's got a brother in Florida and he's got a brother in Chicago, and when we were hanging out and watching, Star Wars.
Brothers are the best side story of the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. In a way we've never seen before with the Pope. I mean, honestly.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
And the old friends, that lady who maybe was a classmate of his and now she's a teacher, and she was telling stories on him. All good stories, but to me it humanizes him.
Yeah, I think so, and I think in today's world, if you're going to have that conversation, maybe that's what we're talking about in a different way, the social media aspect.
Right.
I think that may be required and may be effective. I was just thinking of a colleague of mine from NBC Chicago, Mary Ahern. She'd covered the church, again, a long-time church watcher. She did not cover the funeral, though, for a variety of reasons, but she went for the conclave. And I said this on our air in New York because I couldn't imagine being Mary Ahern, who's covered the church forever. In fact, it'd be well worth to try to get her on the podcast. It really would.
Yeah.
She was there, but someone who's covered it, and then an American emerges, and then he's from Chicago. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
Yeah.
She must have been beside herself.
Amen. Hey, do you have any other thoughts or any things that you just thought because we thought this was going to be a conclave podcast,
right,
and then it quickly turned into
right. Yeah, we can. I can tell you who I think my leading candidates are.
I know. Right on the ground. It's going to be Prevost.
It's a strong feeling. You can take it to the bank.
Yeah.
David, how has AI changed reporting, anchoring? It's everywhere.
Yeah, and I feel like we're in the early part of the frontier, but the ground keeps unfolding in front of us. So, I think I've actually participated in some sessions on this about AI, and I liken it to, this is a little stark what I'm about to say, but if I put a gun in the middle of the room and I put it on the table, same gun, and someone comes in and their intent is to rob someone, an old lady, well, that's one set of circumstances. If I put a gun in the middle of the room and a soldier trying to protect women and children who are under siege from terror. So, and that's a little stark, but that's, as I'm hearing it, AI, especially now where we're having what we call news deserts. A lot of small local newspapers have folded around the country. And when you think about it, the real coverage and the real revealing of maybe government malfeasance is covering the water board meeting or the library school board meeting, because then you get in the weeds and you don't have that. My understanding is that there are places where the minutes of meetings can be input into AI, aggregated, and then it helps maybe a handful of reporters see the information and get to it and maybe pursue a story there. So that's it. I think what we're worried about is when AI then starts, so that's one thing of AI taking everything that's out there and synthesizing it. But then when it gets into the predictive, of trying to predict what something's going to happen, or pretend that it's Dave Ushery saying it, or what have you, that's what we're concerned about. So we're still figuring out, Maggie and Father Tom, the role of AI, but it is taking on roles in newsrooms, or for the acceleration and speed, right? So the BBC, I'm sure, wanted to get the translate up, but if there's an error, you still need some human backstop, right? And we feel that in the same way with our reporting. So it's kind of a apprehensive, but again, one of those things where we have to figure it out, if that makes sense.
Right.
What does that do to us spiritually and how we navigate one another, including news and including what does spirituality look like and all that? I really appreciate you said it's like, is that David Ushery reporting this or is this, chatbot?
I mean, we heard examples of reporters in Venezuela who fear for their life. So they've created an AI image and handle, but it is their reporting. But in order to preserve their life, which is an interesting challenge to have.
Right.
That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. I know you got to run, but do you have any more thoughts on just kind of this whole experience that we've just all been through? Pope Francis passing, election of a new pope. It's pretty momentous. So in some ways we're looking to the future, but there's also kind of like reflection time about like, what does this all meant? Do you have any thoughts?
I agree. And I think, in a world where cynicism can take hold, we'll obviously go back to the same discussions about the church, both macro and micro on the parish level. It was something to see. There's nothing like being in St. Peter's Square when either a new pope emerges, as I was there for Francis, or one is being mourned but also celebrated for his life. And people, we would stand there one night, and so during the day you may have tourists, but at night it were the Romans that were just coming streaming in. And the church, for better or for worse, knows how to present that in a grandiose way. And it is something. And sometimes when you're under deadline pressure, I'll say this to the guys I'm working with, the people, the men and women I'm working with, guys, let's just take a moment and just absorb, regardless of it, because we're getting so caught up. But you're looking up at and look, as long as I've been doing it, it's still something.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Wow.
So nice to meet you, David.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Thanks so much, David.
Okay.
Next time I'll be in New York soon, so hopefully we
Please
can
give
grab
me
a
a
beer or
call. It'd be great to see you.
We'll grab a well, I guess that's the other big debate is with Chicago, is it deep dish or thin now? I'm still on the thin side, but
it's it's not really a debate here. I mean,
good point.
Thank you.
All right, take care. God bless, Dave.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Well, this has been so fun talking to David Ushery. Thank you, Father Tom, for getting him on the podcast. It was a lot of fun.
He's been a great friend of the Paul's Fathers for a long time, and I'm really grateful that we've got some more guests coming, which is great. The Paul's Fathers have made a lot of great friends over the last number of years, and what's been great is being able to share these friends because they're so insightful, and really liked how that conversation went just in terms of we're talking about the conclave and Pope Francis's passing, but we're also, it's like we're in the social media age, and we've been in this age for a while, but it continues to expand and grow. And how do we all make sense of it? Now with AI throwing that on top of it, I think it's great to kind of have those experiences. And David Ushery is such a seasoned professional. I was almost kind of relieved to hear that he's struggling to keep up. So it's like, okay, so it's not just it's not just the rest of us.
Yeah, I was like, I love him. I love him even more now.
Yes.
Yeah, I get it. Doing the social media, and you're on the air, and you're writing, and you're answering calls, it's craziness.
But I also love that part where he said, let's just take a beat and let's just take this in. And I think it's part of my job description, so to speak, as a priest, is almost to remind people that. So I was so glad that David did that. It's just that because we can all, whether we're just consuming news or whether we're trying to do podcasts or produce podcasts or like what we're doing now, it's just, hey, let's just stop and take a beat. And what does this all mean? And, for those who are Catholic, those people of faith, what's God doing in the midst of all this? And how is God leading us? And what does God want us to pay attention to? So I think in the midst of all this, it was a great reminder, and I thought it was great that David really reminded us of that in the midst of this amazing experience he had in Rome that he was sharing with all of us.
Absolutely. And we would love if you told your friends about our podcast, Candid Catholics, and you can find it anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, YouTube, where else, Father?
Spotify, I think, is that
that's right.
Yeah. And then also just, one quick programming note. A lot of our podcasts came out really, really quick because we were trying to rush all this stuff together for the conclave, and then the conclave ended. So we were kind of like a little bit of a fire hose thing. So we're going to take a week or two off. Maggie is going to Japan.
I am.
She's going to Japan on assignment. She's going to report on how Japan is processing the conclave. I think she's also going on for some vacation too. I think that's another reason why she's
exactly. But we'll be back.
We'll be back. We're going to have a couple more conversations. We'll close out the season, but we really appreciate it. Let other people know. And if you have any feedback for us on what we can be doing better, that's great. We're just really grateful that you're with us along for the ride. And thanks from Candid Catholics. God bless.